A flight that lasts only 12 minutes ends in a terrible tragedy. But this isn't just a story about a plane crash. It's a really powerful and frankly a cautionary tale about human psychology. It's about how that intense desire to just get home overrides training, clear warnings, and even our basic survival instincts. So let's break down what happened and how this psychological trap called get home-itis was right at the heart of it all. So to really understand everything that went down on that dark and stormy night, you have to know this term. Get home-itis. It sounds kind of funny, but it's a very real thing in aviation. Think of it like a kind of tunnel vision, where the destination becomes so important that it just eclipses all the risks along the way. It's that little voice in your head that says, just push through, you're almost there. And as we're about to see, that little voice can have absolutely devastating consequences. Okay, so let's set the scene here. The date is January 12th, 2023. We have a 43-year-old private pilot, and he's in Canton, Georgia after a work trip. His plan? It's simple. Fly his single-engine Piper PA-28 back to his home airport in Virginia. But there was a clock ticking, a really big external pressure that would end up framing every single decision he made that night. And here it is, that pressure, laid out plain as day in the official NTSB report. See, he wasn't just trying to get home to sleep in his own bed. He had a passenger flight to Europe scheduled for the very next day. So this wasn't just a wish or a desire, it was a hard deadline. And that created this powerful internal motivation to just get in the air no matter what stood in his way. Now, what's so fascinating about this slide is how it spells out the pilot's actual abilities versus the challenge he was about to take on. So he's a private pilot, about 200 hours of flight time, which in the grand scheme of things is still pretty new. But look closer. That line right there, instrument rating, none. This is absolutely crucial. It means he was only qualified to fly by looking outside, using the actual horizon to keep the plane level. And check out his experience. Only 15 hours of flying at night and literally 0 hours flying in actual clouds. So what do we have? We've got a pilot with pretty limited experience, and he's facing this major deadline. But here's the thing. This situation didn't just sneak up on him. There was a whole series of clear, unambiguous warnings, a sequence of events on the ground that gave him multiple chances to make a different and much, much safer choice. This timeline is, well, it's just remarkable to look at. He shows up at 4 p.m. and it's storming. The airport staff explicitly tell him, you should not fly in this. They even go so far as to book a hotel room for him. And he leaves. You'd think, okay, good, safe decision made. But then, hours later, after everyone has gone home for the night, he comes back. He fuels the plane himself and takes off, all alone, straight into the storm. He actively worked around the very safety net that was put there to protect him. And this right here is maybe the most critical mistake of all. The one official weather briefing he got was for a 5 p.m. departure. By the time he actually took off, after 8 p.m., the weather had changed a lot. If he had gotten an updated briefing, which is standard procedure, the recommendation would have been a definite, crystal clear no-go. Do not fly under visual flight rules. He launched without the single most critical piece of information for that flight. So, the warnings were ignored. The plane was full of fuel. At 5 minutes past 8 in the evening, the pilot was airborne. Our focus now shifts from the decisions on the ground to the terrifying reality inside that cockpit for the brief flight that followed. Just 12 minutes. That's it. That's how long the entire flight lasted, from the wheels leaving the runway to the final data point. In less time than it takes to make a cup of coffee, a whole series of irreversible events unfolded in the dark, ending in a total loss of control. The speed at which this situation became completely unrecoverable is, well, it's truly chilling. And this image, this flight track data, it shows you exactly what happened in those final moments. You can see the plane climbing like it should at first, but then, in just the last 2 minutes, things go completely haywire. The plane climbs, it descends, it turns sharply, and then it enters what the NTSB officially calls a rapidly descending spiral turn. This is the textbook signature of a pilot who has become spatially disoriented and has completely lost control of their aircraft. And why did he lose control? Well, these weather radar images, with his flight path laid right on top in magenta, they tell the whole story. He flew directly into an area of heavy rain and clouds. The very instrument meteorological conditions he was not trained for, not certified for, and not equipped to handle.
He essentially flew blind into the very storm everyone on the ground could see.
The flight path shows us what happened, right? But now we really need to dig in and understand why it happened. And the answer isn't some kind of mechanical failure. The NTSB found nothing wrong with the plane. The real cause lies in the complex and often really counterintuitive relationship between the human body and the physics of flying in the dark.
The core scientific reason for this crash really boils down to this term right here: spatial disorientation. Basically, when you're inside a cloud at night with absolutely no visual reference to the horizon, your inner ear starts playing tricks on you. Your body can feel like it's turning when you're actually flying straight, or it might feel like you're climbing when you're actually pointed at the ground. You literally, physically lose your sense of which way is up.
And this is the critical distinction. You've got VFR, or visual flight rules. That's flying by sight. It's what our pilot was certified to do. But he flew into IMC, instrument meteorological conditions. That's a situation where you have to fly by relying only on your instruments because there is nothing to see outside. Flying in IMC requires an instrument rating, and that means extensive training that this pilot simply did not have. He crossed a line from a world he understood into one he was completely and totally unprepared for.
So here it is, the official finding from the National Transportation Safety Board, and it is blunt and it is crystal clear. The probable cause was the pilot's own decision, which led directly to spatial disorientation and a loss of control. They also point out his lack of qualifications and his inexperience as major contributing factors. The accident didn't start in the air. It started on the ground, the very moment he decided to take off.
Now, this is the part of the story that goes way beyond aviation. Because get homeitis isn't just a pilot problem. It's a human problem. It's that psychological trap of letting a goal, or a deadline, or some external pressure completely blind us to mounting risks right in front of our face.
You know, pilots are trained to use tools just like this, the PAVE checklist, to systematically think about risk. They assess themselves, the pilot. They check the aircraft. They look at the environment. But look at that last letter, E for external pressures. It's given equal weight for a reason, because that desire to get somewhere, to not disappoint someone, to meet that deadline, that pressure can be just as dangerous as a thunderstorm or a faulty engine. So how do we avoid falling into this trap? Well, the NTSB gives us some really clear guidance. Get the real data, not just the information you hope to see. Actively, consciously, refuse to let external pressures make your decision for you. Be ruthlessly honest with yourself about what you're capable of, and always, always have a plan B. I mean, in this case, the pilot had a plan B. It was the hotel room. He just chose not to use it.
And that really brings us to the final question, one for all of us. This isn't just about flying. It could be driving exhausted on the highway just to make it home for a holiday. It could be pushing through a project at work even though you're completely burned out, or ignoring that warning light on your car because you're late for a meeting. Get homeitis shows up everywhere. The real lesson from this tragic 12-minute flight is to learn to recognize that pressure in ourselves and to have the courage to make the call that gets us home safely, even if it's a day later than we planned.